It's Thursday, the 11th of June, 2020, and this is From the Mind of Joe. Today's reflection: an untimely blog post. I woke early this morning, remembering an old blog post. Well, technically, it wasn't a blog post, since there weren't really blogs 24 years ago, at least not as we think of them today. Rather, it was a newsgroup posting to a thread that became popular. The thread, and therefore my post, were eventually immortalized in a set of frequently asked questions regarding real-life experience with the martial art Aikido. The piece itself describes an event from 1986, 10 years prior. The details were still fresh in my mind when I wrote it, and the details are still fresh now, 34 years later. As is the second half of that story, the part I didn't share. And it all seems particularly relevant today. So, if you don't mind, stand by for part 1, a brief reading of the original post, and part 2, the rest of the story. About 10 years ago, I was at the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor when there was a big problem with racism. A group of ignorant Caucasians were posting papers about campus, sliding them under doors, and so forth. The black population had some real cause to be protesting. Now, in fact, there was a different protest every day, but this one had merit. Well, it was April, and I was walking back across the quad from the library in the evening with my briefcase. The dorm mate was walking his girlfriend across the quad to her dorm. A group of 12 black high schoolers were walking up the main street in front of the Union Building and began shouting some fairly rude comments directed at the white girl. I state it that way because that's how they expressed it themselves. While perhaps it would have been in my friend's best interest to simply ignore the crew and continue heading off in his original different direction, as fortune would have it, he opened his big macho mouth. One broke from the group, ran across the lawn, and began a punch. But, too bad for him, my friend had managed to obtain a mid-level taekwondo belt. One shot to the face sent him for a loop to the ground. Of course, that was interpreted as an open invitation to the rest. He put one more to the ground with a shot to the groin, but was then overwhelmed, girlfriend standing dumbfounded, in shock, off to the side. Odds now 10-1. I circled by unnoticed and grabbed the girl, instructing her to run to the library to get security. Then I came through, as if walking by, and threw my briefcase in for a block to a fist approaching my friend. Now, 9-2. Taking a couple of punches, I managed to get it into my friend's head that we had to retreat about half a block to the Union Building's side entrance, which was open at that hour. It seemed to last for approximately, forever, plus or minus. A comical note. One kid actually picked up a bottle from the street and, you guessed it, just like the movies, broke it up against some brickwork. Unlike the movies, though, he only cut up his own hand. 8-2. Some lost their bravery seeing the others. 6-2. Some stood off as we got close enough to the building. 4-2. I got a lucky shot. 3-2. Then we made it to the door and inside. My friend was ahead of me looking back as I entered, and I saw a very shocking expression. Wham! Another bottle, to the back of my head this time. Failed to even stun, so imagine the surprise when I slowly turned around and glared at the clown. That was the end of their bravery, and the end of the show. 2 important observations. 1. I knew no Aikido at the time, though I'd heard of its existence. Even without knowledge then, I think I would have handled the thing in a similar way today with knowledge. That is, retreating to safety as soon as possible. 2. The attacks that were actually presented to me at that time were genuine, that is, designed for real harm. In retrospect today, I'm sitting here giggling. The attacks were trivial and would have been easily handleable given my only third cue, though ready for a second, level of training in Aikido. The 4-on-1 randori we practice in the dojo is far more fierce than what I experienced that day, but things were a bit in slow motion at the time. Now that I think of it, my first randori preceded my training by 10 years. I may have to place my vote for Aikido effectiveness now. I think now that, given the way I responded in actual conflict, for me to study any other art would have gone against my nature, which was displayed that day. Peaceful, protective, at least of myself and friend, and thinking. Not a slam on Taekwondo, but rather on my friend and his instructor. This fool had the idea to trade insults with a small gang while alone in the dark with his girlfriend present, and then stood there tossing a few punches and kicks, as if he believed he'd finish them all off. What a punch, though. Jeesh. Wrong idea, wrong philosophy, wrong training, and so forth. He clearly hadn't made the level we strive for. Well, we lived. Hardly a bruise. The girl at least made it to the library safely and unnoticed, but was so confused we found her later, just standing in the lobby, never having called security or police. She could probably stand some correct training, too. Here begins part 2. You know that part where I said, we eventually made it back to the library? Yeah. There are a few details that weren't quite relevant to the Aikido forum. The Union building to which we retreated was certainly the nearest safe spot with an open door that we could reach at the hour. Coincidentally, the Union building was also attached to West Quad, the dormitory where my buddy and I lived. We made it back to our floor and, adrenaline still high, shouting. He had everyone's attention as he relayed his own version of the story. Before we knew it, the entire crew was grabbing baseball bats and other accessories, ready to take to the streets and hunt the offenders down. This was not going to end well for anyone. I reminded them that we should first find the girl and get her home safely. After that, I explained, we could continue the manhunt. They rallied and cheered as we head out, first through West Quad, then the Union Building, across State Street, along the south end of the quad, and to the library. There we found the girl waiting, and, as noted, she hadn't called security or the police. Let's get her back to the dorm where she'll be safe. They rallied and cheered as we briskly marched her back to her dorm, burning a little more time and a little more adrenaline in the process. Finally, centering around the quad again, which way did they head off? That way. Well, plus or minus. I managed to plausibly steer a wild goose chase around the main campus until the mob collectively agreed they were probably all hiding and afraid to come back. The mob slowly settled back into a collection of friends and floormates, trading stories as we walked back to the dorm. So, what's the takeaway? Is there a moral to the story? These were unfortunate circumstances. There was an inappropriate comment, and there was an inappropriate response. There was a prideful escalation to physical threat, and there was a violent suppression in self-defense. Both tribes rallied to join their own wronged members, and neither, in the moment, was willing to back down. The issue of racism on campus was perhaps only a backdrop for the scene, but that backdrop soon caught fire, fueling both sides. God only knows how this would have ended if it was the internet era, and larger agendas seized the narrative to make it their own. As just one man, young at the time, I did what I could, with what little experience I had, within the constraints of the situation. Hopefully, there are others doing the same in their own situations today. We'll know sure eventually. The history will tell, even if it is in a blog post 34 years from now. We'll know what tomorrow brings.